Hello, friends and neighbors. My name is Adam, and I'm attempting to be the most prolific reviewer of all time. And I just finished watching a movie from 1985, directed by Elim Kilmov and starring Alexei Kravchenko and Olga Mironov. And it was written by Kilmov and Ales Adamovich. And this film is called Come and See. And it's one of those films that I had a different impression of before I actually started to watch it because this film is sort of described as being one of the greatest anti war films of all time, and the transformation that the character of Fiora goes through is horrifying. And I don't want to say that it's a pro war film because it's definitely not. But there are films which are, theoretically anti war, but they make war look so fun that it doesn't really make it an anti-war film. And I think a perfect example would be the film 1917. Like, I mean, it's not fun in the normal way of fun, but it looks like interesting because you're going through this apocalyptic sort of uh, landscape. But Come and See doesn't make it fun at all. Uh, it's not even that graphic, I would say. A lot of the violence and brutality is hidden or suggested. There are like a few parts where, somebody picks up a piece of a limb or something. Um, but what do I think about it? I think that it doesn't actually work, at least not for me. And the reason it doesn't work, at least it doesn't work as being like a great anti war film, because I don't know. I I felt not a lot of sympathy for the boy. And that seems like a little very harsh thing to say. It's not that I didn't feel sympathy for him. It's just we don't get any sort of context of what kind of world these atrocities are happening in. That's one part. He just digs up a rifle and he goes off and he joins the partisans. And a village elder says, you shouldn't do that because the Germans will come. And the Germans do come, but the Germans came to most villages in Belarus. So I don't know. I didn't find myself, you know, I didn't find myself emotionally moved by the film. And I think it's a combination of there's a lack of context about the boy's life, and there's also a lack of so there's lack of context, and I think that I also the other part that I didn't like about the film is this surrealistic aspect to it. And I know that war is probably very surreal, and the things that you go through in war are very surreal, but it starts like it doesn't even build up to that surrealism. The movie starts that way. So Fiora joins the partisans in the woods, and he's crying because he can't go with the partisans, but he's also crying because he hears a girl crying, and they have this very surreal conversation with each other. Um, so, yeah, it's hard to emotionally resonate with it. It's graphic and it's brutal. And the thing that I wanted to say earlier that I kind of lost my train of thought, is I think that people generally in North America don't realize the brutality of the Second World War on the Eastern Front, or maybe they just realize it in a sort of like, theoretical way. But in Belarus, at the end of the film, it says that 629 Belarusian villages were destroyed, and this movie was made in the Soviet Union, and I think the number actually was much higher. It was 5,000 villages were burnt to the ground, according to Wikipedia, and some villages were burnt more than once. Like I think one was burnt 4 or 5 times down to the ground. So you can imagine, you're you're devastated the first time. The second time, you're also like, at what point does it become, uh, you know, what at what point do you become numb to it? And in Belarus, I think 20%, 2 million people died during the Second World War, which was about 40% of that area's population. So this was like incredibly brutal. Um, so I think that people don't really know that, and they come into this movie kind of like, oh, okay, it's so horrible. I didn't know that before. So this movie is the most horrible, the most shocking movie. Um, and I didn't know that. So what they're showing in fiction, it, I mean, it's horrible, right? But it doesn't. I don't think it's the greatest anti-war film ever made, or maybe I haven't seen the greatest anti-war film in my opinion yet. But I don't think this is one. This is definitely an anti-war film, but the surrealism I think doesn't help its message, and the brutality is true. But I think that people who are not aware of what happened in Belarus would be shocked. But if you know, it's not shocking. One thing that this is kind of a bit of a non sequitur, but the one thing that I always wonder about the German behavior during the Second World War is, so the Germans decide to attack the Russians in 1941, which was not a great decision in retrospect, but they decide to attack uh, the Russians in 1941, and earlier in 1939 they had invaded Poland together. So the Germans invaded on the 1st of September, and then the Soviets invaded on the 9th of September. So then they had this sort of alliance for a couple of years, and then in 1941 Hitler ordered the invasion of Russia. So the thing that I don't understand from a tactical point of view and a logistic point of view is, this is at the time when the preparations for the Holocaust were like well underway, and you can see that some of the violence that's depicted in this movie is connected to the Holocaust, right? So, but so when Hitler and the Germans invade Ukraine and Belarus, they are originally get a lot of support because the Soviets had come in after the Civil War, and they had taken control of these areas, and they had been like very, very brutal, and repression was really, really high. But for some reason the Germans decided to be even more brutal than the Soviets, so of course people were going to choose that side. And they didn't necessarily have to, and that's the thing that I don't understand from a tactical logistic point of view. So in the film, and it is really well filmed, all of this chaos. So the last part of the film is when the Fior gets captured, and he's in this Belarusian village, and all of the people are rounded up, and they're put in these buildings, and then the buildings are burnt down, and you have this sort of like carnival atmosphere where the Germans are drinking, and there's like maybe about 200 Germans in this like area all together like drinking, and this one guy's got like a marmoset for some reason. So I think it's a marmoset. It's a weird monkey creature. Which is so that's the kind of movie it is. I'm not saying I don't know if any Nazi officers had marmosets, but that seems like a very surreal thing to put in a movie. But anyway, so they're attacking this village, and they're attacking like maybe I don't know 100 civilians. So you have a village being burnt down, and all of the people in the village being killed by about 200 German soldiers. And then later, those soldiers would be attacked by partisans, and that those 200 would mostly be wiped out, except for three or like maybe about seven of them who were later executed. So, from a military point of view, I mean, why spend your time burning down villages? Why not focus on the partisans? I don't know. I'm not like a military genius or something, so because it does seem that a lot of countries, when they're fighting guerrilla conflicts, that's what they do. That's what the British did with the Boers. That's what the Americans did in Vietnam, and that's what the Germans did in Ukraine and Belarus during the Second World War. But yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then the Holocaust is the same thing. So you have, you know, you are fighting a war, a two front, three front, four front war for your very survival against, you know, the Russians who have huge manpower at the time, the Americans who have huge economic power, and, you know, a bunch of resistance groups, and you decide that you can spare the logistical capacity to murder 6 million people. Doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah, so I'm rambling a bit, but I didn't like. I don't know. You don't really like or dislike a movie like this. The the question should be not whether you like or dislike the movie, but whether the movie accomplishes its goal. And I think that the goal of the movie is so the writer of the movie actually based this on memoirs of people who survived that time period in history. So he said like the point was that it would never happen again, and that it needed to be recorded for history. So I think that it's too surrealistic to be an accurate representation of what happened. And you don't need an accurate representation of what happened if you're making art. But yeah, I don't think that it succeeds, but that's probably just my personal point of view. What do you think? Do you think that this movie succeeds in its objective to present people? You know, do you think it succeeds in its objective? If yes, maybe explain to me why you think that it succeeds in the show notes. Not show notes, in the comments. Yeah, so my next goal, I have 153 subscribers, and my goal is to have 200 subscribers by the end of January, so that would be great if you liked my stuff. So like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, please follow. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.